So for indigenous people in Mexico,
Uh-huh.
how are they treated by like the government or people who don't identify as native? They identify as the Mexican people. Who? How do they treat people who identify as native or indigenous?
After the conquest, after the
Well, even
the,
now,
the invasion,
even now.
very bad. This discrimination there's no they weren't allowed to commerce in certain areas, and they weren't allowed just to commerce certain items.
Mm-hmm.
It's restricted. You know? It was the you mean the we call the viceroyalty, the 200 years of the Spanish rule. That's the period you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about well, even today. So yeah, that started about in the 1500s. If I'm understanding histories, that's when the Spanish came down to
Mhm.
South America and started at least actually in the late 1400s, and then they came in, and that's when they did the same thing that they did to native tribes in the North America, which is they set up missions and
Mhm.
they set up boarding schools. Even they're trying
Mhm.
to basically bring Catholicism to the indigenous people. So, if I have an understanding, we have a very similar beginning in that regard. But I'm talking post that period. Um, so, for example, after the Spanish were in North America,
Mhm.
we had then the British that came, and they had Manifest Destiny, where they basically stole all our lands. They were killing us. They were wiping out our food sources, and then they just basically colonized us, right?
Mhm.
So after the Spanish brought the missions to you guys, where they were also murdering you, what fast forward after the Spanish? What's happening? What is that looking like?
Well, I can say is when something happened to you abruptly and destroy all your cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you wake up, you ended up like no past. The situation that you described is similar, but on different times. I
Mm-hmm.
studied that period very well because I do my thesis about the Mexican American War in the Southwest. So the colonization of Mexico, it took 300 years. No, it wasn't fast. It started in Mexico City, in central Mexico, Mexico City, uh, Puebla, all those peoples around. The core of the civilization in central Mexico. By 1600, they were defeated, and they moved 1700. They moved by up north, Zacatecas,
Mm.
and then 1800s they reached Chihuahua and started to conquer, which is Texas. But when they faced the Comanche and the Apache, the Spanish were stuck in a hole.
Mm.
It's a story that we don't know. Actually, the Cherokee defeat the Spanish, and the Spanish has to pay rent to the Cherokees. So the story goes that the Spanish defeat the whole continent, and you see maps that the Spanish Empire, that's fake, that's false. The Spanish, they couldn't control Texas. They built over 28 missions, and only 3 missions survived in a period of 150 years. They never colonized Texas, right?
Right.
So it's different. But when they went down on New Mexico, that was another story, right? New Mexico was conquered in 50 80s, and it was very similar to Mexico City, but it was just one portion from the El Rio Grande up to Santa Fe and Taos. That's all, like maybe 20 towns in a straight line down south. But all around the Rio Grande, it was uh, native territory,
Mm.
hard to conquer. Actually, the ones that helped the Mexicans control the territory was when the American, the Anglo-Saxon people, and the immigrants from Irish and Scotland, they defeat with the new weapons in the 1860s, 1870s, the defeat of the ancient people, the original people of Texas, Oklahoma. It was accomplished.
Oh, because the British settlers, the European settlers, they came and they helped the Spanish defeat.
They were together.
Oh man, so Mexico was established. The government there was established by the Spanish.
Yeah, it was established by the Spanish, and then in 1810, the story goes the Mexican independence. But what happened is that the sons of the Spanish, we call criollos.
Hmm.
Mexico is a very divided country. You just mentioned it. And that's the point that you try to reach, is we are a racist country. I believe in Mexico there is more racism than here in the United States. I'm from Mexico. And we have levels, stratus, right? The black people, Indian people, mixed people, white people, Spanish white people, and maybe the higher level or your color of your skin defines your status, right? So in 1810, there were like in the study ID maybe 4,500 Spaniards from Spain. They had all the rights, and 1 million Spaniards born in Mexico. So white people, but they don't have documents that they were in Spain. They were born in Nueva España. That's what Mexico used to be called Nueva España. So their son of the Spaniards actually they defeat the Spaniards, kick it out the continent, and they rule on Mexico. So the Mexican didn't rule, just a group of people and ethnicity that is why we call Criollo people. They've been controlling Mexico for all Latin America. This is political too. All Latin America for over 200 years. It's an elite, right? So they continue the same colonization process.
That is wild. And then, so the people that are running these countries, none of them are actually originally from there. Okay. So very similar to America. Yeah. I didn't know that.
It's a different color because I studied in Mexico and I studied here. So I see a few differences because the Catholicism and the Spanish tradition is more different than the British Anglo-Saxon way of rule. Like the Spanish, they mix. They say I mix. They say I'm more human, but you're gonna be my slave. And the British people say, you know what? I respect you, but can you move over there?
I would have to say it's a little. I would disagree a little bit with your statement, but that is because they came and they enslaved the indigenous people in South America, Central America, where in North America they did not enslave us, but that's because they brought over African slaves who then they enslaved, and with us they couldn't defeat us, and so they were forced to sign treaties with us, which then they used backhanded, like backdoor contract deals that we didn't understand at the time because we're not writing up contracts to own land, so they just slowly had more and more people move in to the point where we kind of like didn't even have a choice. They just moved onto our land. So yeah, I would say that it was more sneaky backhand deals where they stole our land, and with you guys, they just straight up murdered you and forced you in chains. It sounds like, and that is hardcore.
I agree with you, but at the same time, when you study history, you had to see it through time. Sometimes it's easy to say 500 years, and you try to put it in the same picture. The French has this word mentalite. You had to go right on time. When the Spanish came was in the 1500s, well, 1600s. When actually the Anglo-Saxon people start cover all the line, when they start moving, it was in the 1800s. When actually so it was like 200 years of different in knowledge and technology and in the way how they want to treat the natives. Plus the people that settled North America, they were like more like illustrated. So I agree with you. It was little by little, little by little, right? The end, it was almost the same: destruction, colonization. Like what happened in these cultures here, when we go to ceremonies, we listen to the elders, to the abuelos, and yeah, you know the story because you had interviewed these people, I imagine. They were put in schools, forced to learn, right? But it was 100 years ago. Recently, and
less than 100 years ago.
And they made movies.
Up until the 1974 was the last church, which is that means there's people alive today that were in those churches. There's people alive today that were the priest in those churches. Yeah.
So we can say that we never conquer. The people in the north, the people in the south, we never conquer. They were defeated in many battles, right? But 100 years ago, and Mexico was 400 years earlier. You see, but the people are still struggling. So if the people is still conducting our ceremony, if we still conducting our ceremonies, praying and connecting with nature, even though we were defeated, incarcerated, and sometimes ethnic cleansing, which is very different than genocide, uh, we still here. So I got this for a teacher. We never been conquered.
I like that.